Have you ever looked at total, complete chaos and somehow seen a billion-dollar opportunity? Well, that's exactly what went down in Mumbai back in 2013. So let's get into the story of Porter, a company that managed to build a logistics empire by focusing on trucks, trust, and a really counterintuitive idea.
I mean, that was the big question, right? Just picture the streets of Mumbai. It's this constant, overwhelming flood of traffic and commerce. Three founders looked at this whole scene, this logistics network that was basically on the verge of collapse, and saw a problem that they just had to solve.
You had thousands of trucks, just like these, lining the roads every single day. Drivers would just sit there, waiting for hours, sometimes all day, for a single job that, might not even show up. It was just a staggering waste of time, of resources, of everything. And you can imagine these drivers were really struggling. Their income was totally unpredictable, they had these super long waiting hours, and there was no clear system to connect them with the people who actually needed their services. It was just this endless cycle of inefficiency and frustration. And on the other side, for customers, it was a complete nightmare. Goods weren't showing up on time, which meant businesses were suffering. The entire supply chain was just unreliable. So while most people just saw chaos, the founders of Porter, they saw the pattern. They saw the opportunity. So how'd they decide to tackle this massive problem? Well, it wasn't with some fancy app or a complicated algorithm, at least not at first. Nope, they started by literally hitting the streets. They knew that to really solve the problem, they had to live it. For 6 long months, the founders, Pranav Goyal, Uttam Digga, and Vikas Chaudhry, they just immersed themselves in this world. They did over 500 driver interviews. Just think about that for a second, that level of dedication. They weren't just collecting data points. They were collecting stories, frustrations, and insights, and they tracked it all manually in Google Sheets. And what came out of all that research was this core philosophy, and it's brilliant. It sounds totally backward, right? Serve the drivers first. But they figured if they could build a reliable, happy, and loyal network of drivers, well, the customers would just naturally follow. This one simple idea, back in 2014, became the bedrock of their entire company. And let me tell you, that driver-first bet, it paid off big time. The company took off like a rocket, expanding super fast as more and more drivers and customers flocked to their platform. So from their launch in 2014, they just scaled and scaled, entering new cities, and then by early 2024, they hit this massive milestone, a valuation of $1.2 billion. They were officially a unicorn. But their journey was anything but a straight line to the top. Right when they seemed completely unstoppable, the company made a really risky move, a move that brought them to the absolute brink of failure. Yeah, the roller coaster was about to take a terrifying plunge. They had just 2 weeks of cash left. 2. It was all because of this bold but ultimately failed pivot. See, they tried to expand from their city-based deliveries into long-haul, inner-city logistics, and it nearly cost them everything. The company was literally staring at bankruptcy. But this near-death experience became their greatest teacher. It forced them to stop chasing flashy expansion and instead build a rock-solid operational playbook. This is really where they forged their true identity. Okay, so what's really fascinating here is the choice they made. Instead of chasing a bunch of new features or adding complex stuff to the app, they got obsessive about the small things. Things like reducing delays by just a few minutes, improving punctuality by a couple of percentage points, finding return trips for drivers so they weren't driving back empty. These smart, consistent operational wins, they delivered way more value than any piece of flashy tech ever could. So what can we all learn from Porter's incredible journey, from the brink of total collapse to market dominance? Well, their story leaves us with 5 really powerful, hard-won lessons. All right, here they are. First, you've got to start with purpose. Second, focus on building your supply first. Third, have the wisdom to know when to pivot and when to pivot back. Fourth, remember that operations beat technology. And fifth, at the end of the day, it's all about pure resilience. Let's dive into a couple of these. This one goes right back to their core philosophy. It's so simple when you think about it. Happy, well-paid drivers who get consistent work, they create a reliable, high-quality service. And that reliability is what brings customers in, and more importantly, what keeps them coming back. You build the supply and the demand is going to follow. And what about that failed pivot into intercity logistics? Well, it took an immense amount of courage and humility for the founders to just stop and say, you know what? This was a mistake. Instead of doubling down on a bad bet, they wisely retreated back to their core business. That single decision to have what we'll call strategic humility is what saved them from going under.
So when you put it all together, you really see the formula, don't you? Their purpose-driven mission kept the team together during the really tough times. Their focus on the drivers created a service people could actually trust. And their resilience, which was built over years and years of learning from failures, that's what made them unstoppable.
Let's just let that sink in for a second. Purpose beats technology, operations beat features, and discipline beats rapid diversification. This is the ultimate takeaway from Porter's playbook. Success isn't always about being the most innovative. Sometimes it's just about being the most effective and the most disciplined.
So if you're an entrepreneur out there looking at a chaotic, fragmented market, the message from Porter's story is crystal clear. Go deep on understanding your supply side. Have the humility to admit when you're wrong, and perfect your operations before you even think about chasing massive scale.
Porter's story is just packed with these powerful lessons on strategy and resilience. So now I'm kind of curious to hear from you. What's the one lesson from your own journey, whether it's in business or just in life, that has really defined your success? Go ahead and share your thoughts.